everyone, and welcome to our Long Island Legislative Forum. I'd like to start by thanking our great sponsor, AARP, who is making this event possible. We're going to spend the next hour talking about what's going on in Albany and the legislative priorities for the island as the session wraps up. But before we begin, I just want to go over a few things with the Q&A and the chat function so that everyone is on the same page. If you have any questions for me or the panelists, please direct those into the Q&A. Time permitting, we will, take some of the questions and, integrate those into the conversation. But please feel free to use the chat function to chat with other attendees. Just be sure that you have your chat set for all attendees and panelists to make sure that everyone who's on the Zoom webinar is able to see it and not just the panelists. With that, let's just jump right into the panel. We have a great slated panelists with us today. I'd like to welcome Senator John Brooks from District 8, Senator Anthony Palumbo from District 1, who will be joining us a little bit later, Senator Phil Boyle from District 4, Assemblymember Judy Griffin from District 21, Assemblymember Fred Thiele from District 1, Assemblymember Stephen Englebright from District 4, Assemblymember Kimberly Jean-Pierre from District 11, and from the AARP, Kristen McManus, who is their Associate State Director. Thank you all for joining. I hope that we're going to have a great discussion today. So to start off, I want to just pose the question to each of you, an opportunity to talk about what's on your plate for the end of session, what your priorities are, what piece of legislation that you want to see pushed through before session breaks in a couple weeks. And, I introduced you first, so let's start with you, Senator Brooks.
All right, I think we're unmuted. Good morning and thank you. And it's a great opportunity to be with all of you this morning. We're in a funny position. We have a lot of critical pieces of legislation coming down to the end. There's a lot of negotiation going on right now to, if you will, tweak some of the bills to get them to be acceptable. I've got multiple bills in concerning veterans benefits, firematic related bills, New York American water issues, tax relief. While it's not a direct thing, we still have our favorite subject sometimes, the SALT situation, the taxes and where we're going. Recovery and infrastructure. So right now we're working on virtually all of those subjects hourly throughout the day as we continue to negotiate bills. And we are discussing the introduction of some additional legislation in a couple of areas, diversity for one. We also have the uncertainty of what's happening in Washington and what assistance is coming as we try to recover from the pandemic, and then, like we said, the final actions we're going to take as a legislature, and then we have some uncertainties that have to be addressed with some investigations that are going on. So we're really in a situation where we know when the clock is supposed to run out, but we also know there are multiple issues that are being addressed, and which ones are going to finally come to a vote is not totally certain. I'm pleased with a lot of progress we see, particularly associated with some of the things we're trying to do in medical services for the fire departments and some other things in the fire department areas, and then the recovery programs that we're talking about. So I see the next couple of weeks is a situation where we're going to be in constant motion on different areas, and then see how the priorities come out and what we address. So I think we all recognize we're going to have to be very fluid, if you will, in the next couple of days. I think many of the people on the chat right now we're dealing with on a frequent basis, and I think a lot has been accomplished in the last year. I think we're moving out of the difficulties of the pandemic, but we're not there yet. And I think we all collectively know there's a great deal of relief needed in many areas to help recover, and it's a question of how much of that we can all agree to in the next couple of weeks.
Just to maybe one or two things on your personal priority list. If you had to pick one or two things, what would you say you want to see happen the most, or that you're pushing the hardest for?
Well, there's a couple of bills in the fire service on EMS recovery of expenses that I want to see done, particularly after the year we just went through. Across our state, many communities are supported by volunteer fire departments that provide the medical services, the ambulances for the community. They are not right now allowed to recover those expenses. It is a significant cost to the communities. We're making great progress. I want to see that resolved. And then in my district here on Long Island, we have a tremendous issue right now associated with New York American Water. And we're working with everybody concerned right now to try to resolve those issues there and take a look at the possibility of making it a municipal agency going forward. But the rates and the charges for New York American Water are astronomical. Just fire hydrants, as an example, are about 590% higher than any of the surrounding water companies. It is really a financial nightmare for people. And then I have some districts that did not get their budget through, school districts, that is. We still have a tremendous overdependence on the use of property taxes. There's a real imbalance in how schools are funded. I have a bill that would, with Kimberly, who's also here, we have a bill where we would put a cap on residential property taxes of 50% of total school funding as a way of starting to slow that down. I'm doing what I can to try to get that to be brought to the table so that we can take a look at it. So a quick list, that would be top three things I'd be looking at.
Well, thank you for sharing. Certainly, as you said, it's a lot of uncertainty for the Senate session. A lot of things that Long Island would benefit from that haven't yet made it through both chambers. Assemblymember Griffin, you're next on my screen. Senator Brooks happened to be the first I introduced and first on my screen, but I am going to go just by who's next on my screen. So, Assemblymember Griffin, if what are your main priorities as session's wrapping up?
Okay, thank you for having me. Hello to everyone. And a couple of things I'm in agreement with Senator Brooks. Of course, the American Water is an extremely difficult issue and for our constituents across Nassau County. So still working hard to find an agreement that we can make to resolve this issue. So that's a major issue that, you know, everyone who's involved is really concerned about. Something else that I am interested in really getting to the floor, because it already passed in the Senate, is I have a fair housing real estate bill that legislation came out of the Senate government Senate investigation on real estate on Long Island. And there's much more we can do to really make real estate much more fair and, not, appropriate for everyone, not let, to prevent realtors from not having houses available to everyone, showing houses in certain communities, not blocking people from seeing all houses. So that already passed in the Senate. So I'm interested in passing that because I think that's a positive step for Long Island. I've had a couple of school busing issues with a couple of districts that if we don't get those busing bills passed, they incurring a much bigger expense than we want them to. So those are important too. One already got to the floor and passed. We have another one that's supposed to pass. They don't seem like overly important for everyone, but they're definitely important for the school districts that are involved. And for them, it's for all the residents that belong to that school district. That's very important. As Senator Brooks mentioned, the bill that he and Assemblywoman Jean-Pierre have introduced. I'm on that bill as well, and I would love to see that passed because, again, I think that's a step in the right direction to help, decrease the tax burden to residents of every school district, because that's, always an issue for the school districts. Luckily, my school districts all passed their budget, so that part is good. And furthering, we have a number of bills in the Medicaid and pharmacy benefit area. That's really important, especially to seniors, to get those bills passed because you know medical, pharmacy bills are huge expense for everyone, but definitely for seniors on a limited income. So it's very important that we get those passed. We also passed a number of long-term care improvements, and so I was glad that we passed a lot of things, even visitation. Many people during the year of COVID were not able to see their loved ones, which is really difficult. So we got a lot of bills passed that really help on a lot of different levels. So I was happy to see that as well. And yeah, so it's just kind of tying up the last couple of weeks, just tying up the things that are really important to complete and have it passed in both houses and go forth. We just passed I have a JFK noise bill for JFK LaGuardia. Noise is a big problem, has really impacted the health of so many residents of Nassau County and the city and the boroughs. So we passed that. We got the funding for it in the budget for the study. So that is crucial to get passed in the Senate and have Governor Cuomo sign it into law, because we already have the money so we can get started with that study. So that would be really important for so many Long Island and city communities. And I guess that's all I have for now.
Well, that seems like plenty to fill out the last couple of weeks of session.
Yes, maybe too much.
There's always so much stuff at the end that that gets passed, and never enough time.
That's exactly true.
Assemblymember Jean-Pierre, what are your priorities as session's wrapping up?
Well, first, let me say good morning and thank you to AARP and City and State for having this forum. I want to give a special shout out to my two AARP folks that I, Sid and Barbara, who work with me locally to make sure that I'm well aware of some of the priorities of AARP. So thank you, and special shout out to them. But some of the things that we are working on with just 2 weeks left and 7 session days. I had actually just passed a few weeks ago my public utility bill, which would allow the public hearing notice to be on our bill, to be on the utility bill, so we can know when there's a rate increase. And seniors are usually mostly impacted by that because not having the notice and not being aware of utility rate hikes is something that's in news, usually in a little small blurb in Newsday articles, and we don't really print, we read what's online. So just to make sure that it's transparent and it's readily available for our constituents to know. So it passed the Assembly, waiting for it to pass the Senate. Working on, as John Brooks and Judy Griffin mentioned, the bill that John Brooks and I have a few housing discrimination bills. We've read the 25-page paper. We've talked about it. There's many discussions that have happened around housing discrimination on Long Island. And I have a few bills that I'm looking forward to passing. As chair of libraries, we're hoping to, libraries, everyone uses libraries, from our babies to our senior population. And we're hoping to open the door to ensure that libraries can come up to date. We've seen the pandemic, how libraries had to change from in-person to a more technology virtual world. And we need to make sure that our libraries, which are the hub of our communities, are able to transform into that new world. So opening capital funding and matching funds for our libraries is very critical. So I'm hoping to pass some legislation and to bring, with Amazon and Google Books, we're all doing the ebook thing now. So I'm hoping that we can pass one of my ebook legislations where libraries don't have to feel that they're competing with Amazon and Google with our ebooks. And I'm very proud of legislation that we just recently passed, which would require mammograms for all incarcerated women. The rates for breast cancer is too high Whether you're in jail or not, care should be given to everybody. And quality care. So I'm very excited about those things. So with just a few days left and 2 weeks left of session, there's lots to be done, as you said. We always scramble at the end, but that's just what New Yorkers do, right? And I am excited to really end a session. And we had a really good budget this year where we can really focus on providing funds for small groups that do so much with so little.
Well, that's one of the good reasons that we're doing forums like this, so that anyone who's tuning in knows what's happening. You know, there's a little bit of scrambling at the end. There's so much to know, and want to get as much information out there as possible about what's going on in Albany and what they should know about what's happening, what they should be caring about. Kristen, if you could, share some of AARP's priorities for the end of session that you'd like to share with the legislators as well, if they aren't already aware.
Sure. Thanks, Rebecca. And thanks for everyone for joining us. It's great to be able to see you all and have this discussion. We have plenty of issues that we're working on and focusing on, but we have a top 3 for the end of session. The first is a bill that's already passed the Assembly. So thank you to the Assembly members. You've all supported and helped move this forward. It's strengthening the Secure Choice Savings Program, which is a state facilitated retirement savings program that gives private sector employees access to their own Roth IRA if their employer doesn't already offer something. We're looking to model this more closely after the very successful California law that was passed and enacted. And this will really help workers save. Workers are 20 times more likely to save if we're able to strengthen the program and allow them to save directly from their paycheck. So we really hope to see some strong support in the Senate over the next few weeks and to get this up to leadership, to get it to a vote on the floor. It's crucial. We have far too many people that are retiring at or near the poverty level, and we really need to help people build their own financial future. The second bill that we're working on, and thanks for those who have mentioned prescription drug affordability, because this is a huge issue, particularly for older adults. The most likely reason that older adults stop taking medication is because they can't afford it. So one of the bills that we're working on to address that is a Biaggi and Gottfried bill that would ban pay for delay agreements. These are when a brand name drug manufacturer will pay a generic drug manufacturer to delay the release of the more affordable generic drug to the market. So they continue to have the monopoly on the drug. The generic drug company gets paid for essentially doing nothing, and the consumers really lose out on access to more affordable prescription drugs. So this is a bill that would completely prohibit that practice. And the third bill that we're working on is a Senator Harcum and Assemblymember Epstein bill around standardizing the procedures for constructing accessory dwelling units. These are secondary residences that are on the site of a primary residence, sometimes called a mother-in-law apartment. But these we think are really great for allowing older adults to age in place, have their own independence and their own space, but still be close to friends or family if they need their family caregivers. It's also just a great way to tackle an affordable housing problem. So we hope that all of the legislators will be able to support that, particularly Secure Choice. We need to get that done this year before the end of session.
Well, it's always nice when there's a list with bills, exactly what you want to get done, focused, and you know what you want, what bills it needs to get passed. It's good to have like a nice hard and fast list that our attendees hopefully can look into further for greater specifics. Assemblymember Englebright, as we're wrapping up, what are some of your top priorities for the end of session? Assemblymember, you're still muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. The top priority really is to point toward the proposed constitutional amendment to provide the right to clean air, clean water, and a healthful environment. And that's already passed, but the work lies ahead to alert the public to the opportunity for them to secure this as a constitutional right. And so that's kind of an ongoing priority. In terms of bills, there are several top priorities. One is to ban flame retardants that have proven to be cancer causing. That's a bill that has strong support in the Senate and in the Assembly as well. And we need to pass that, I believe, to protect our firefighters and first responders and of course homeowners and residents. We have a bill that is kind of a sleeper, which is a bill that I'm doing with Senator Gorin to require best available technology to be used in certain parts of Suffolk County. This would require new sewer systems to not just use any off-the-shelf technology, but best available technology, and to make use of the knowledge that we have regarding the flow patterns and the residence time of contaminants in soils in nearshore areas. I think that's an important bill, and it should be a priority. And we reported it out of committee this week. There's a couple of bills that I am hoping that we can move forward with. One is invasive species in boat inspection for canoes and other boats in the Adirondacks. That's a Jones bill. It's a priority. It's being negotiated right now, but it's certainly a priority for the Adirondack Council and many of the Adirondack advocates, and to protect the lakes from being subjected to excessive algal growth and weeds. So this is an important part of maintaining the pristine nature of the Adirondacks. I have a number of other bills that I'm sponsoring that might be worth mentioning here. One is to urge the municipalities to make better use of recycled glass, perhaps as crushed glass in asphalt, concrete and roadway subgrades. And this would be a study bill for the Department of Environmental Conservation. Speaking of study bills, there's an important study bill, I think, that was vetoed last year. We're going to pass it again. It's sponsored by Member Barnwell to establish a New York seawall study commission. I think it does make sense when you consider that sea level is rising, that the global climate crisis is affecting our coastline areas especially, and that the business district of our nation, indeed the world, is just a few feet above sea level. When we had the Superstorm Sandy, we had people who drowned in their apartments in lower Manhattan. I think it does make sense to at least think about a series of possible alternatives to just letting things happen. And that's the Barnwell bill for a seawall commission. I just want to mention there's a bill that Mr. Thiele has put forward that has caught my attention, really did not come to my attention until this past week, but I think it's an important bill. and it deals with the use of floatables for kelp production to remove nitrate from coastal waters. And the more I look at this bill, the more I think that Member Thiele is on the right track. And we did not report it out of the committee last week. I regret that, but we're going to explore ways to get that bill advanced. And even if that requires bringing the committee back into session or rerouting the bill so that it can go to the floor. So those are some of the priorities. And I only wish we had more time. We're running out of days, but these and other important measures are certainly on our mind as we approach the final days of the session.
I think that's a good segue into Assemblymember Thiele. You just talked about one of the bills that Assemblymember Englebright is, going to look for ways to get passed. Is that one of your priorities? And, what are other things that you're working on for the end of session? Sorry, Assemblymember, you're still muted.
I always say that the words that have been said most often over the last 15 months are unprecedented and please unmute. And I proved that again today. So I thank Assemblyman Englebright for his kind words on the kelp bill. But first, I want to thank also AARP for sponsoring this, and just want to say welcome to all of those that are participating. Yes, that the kelp bill is important because it's one of those win-win-win things that you can do. It is a good environmental bill because it takes nitrogen out of the water, and it is good for the economy because in the area of my district where farming, fishing, and tourism is still very, very important, this is another economic opportunity for people that are engaged in aquaculture in my district. So I know Steve and I we're at a press conference later today to talk about kelp, and we're gonna move forward on that. And I appreciate his help and his support. Just generally on priorities, the pandemic's not over. We still have a lot of work to do, and some of that's in Albany and some of that's home. I agree with my colleagues who talked about the fact that we had a good budget that I think is going to help us deal with economic recovery, whether it's rental assistance or economic assistance to small businesses. It's important to get those dollars out the door now that they've been appropriated through the budget. I think we still have work to do in this session before we leave in that area. For example, the hospitality industry, very important in Long Island, very important in my district. For example, a bill that would still allow restaurants working with the SLA to continue outdoor dining I think is critical. That industry has taken a particular hit. So that certainly is a priority. And of course, yes, it's economic recovery, but the health issues with the pandemic aren't over either. And while we're very excited that when you look at the numbers, the vaccination numbers on Long Island, we've done very well. We still have to make sure that happens, and that isn't passing a bill in Albany. That's doing outreach in our districts to make sure that people have the opportunity to get vaccinated, and we let people know how important that is. As far as bills go, I've got a number of other areas in addition to the kelp bill. I think the future of LIPA is certainly of critical importance, and I think that falls into two basic categories. One is LIPA, whatever form it takes in the future, needs to be more accountable and more transparent. We found that out after the tropical storm last summer, and working with Assemblyman Englebright, and in the Senate, working with Senator Gorin and Senator Kaminsky, there are still a number of bills pending that would accomplish that, whether it be executive compensation or emergency response. And then I think the future of LIPA, that is on the table right now. And Assemblyman Englebright and I have grayer hair than most because we started together in the county legislature when we fought to close the Shoreham nuclear power plant and to establish LIPA, the intent was always for it to be public power. And I think we both think that's still the best option. We will continue to weigh in on the future of LIPA. Again, it's about accountability and transparency. LIPA should be centered on Long Island, not in Albany, not in New Jersey, on Long Island, and should be accountable to Long Islanders. Another issue of critical importance, I think, is housing. And certainly the AARP mentioned the issue of accessory apartments, but it's more than that. And we have forwarded a bill that would allow cities and towns to establish community housing funds. I've got one bill that's just for the Peconic Bay region, my 5 East End towns, but we have another bill that would allow cities and towns across the state to set up those funds. So they have a dedicated fund to improve housing opportunities. This is more critical than ever, particularly on Long Island after, in response to the pandemic. People have fled the cities to Long Island, particularly the East End of Long Island. And, real estate activity is up, building is up, but those that have moved into the community have driven up the cost of housing for those who are local residents who want to try to stay. So we really need to deal with housing. So there's a whole host of different issues: water quality, property taxes. But I think that, to get to more questions and to hear from more of my colleagues, to summarize, the pandemic response isn't over. We need to follow through and make sure that, we do get the kind of economic recovery we have. And with that, when the fall comes and the cold weather comes again, as many people are vaccinated so that we are protected from another spike in the virus. And as I said, for me, critical to Long Island is the future of LIPA and making that utility more responsive and protecting our energy future. And then the issue of affordable housing. Those are the things that I'll be focusing on. Thank you.
We got two more. We got two left from the other side of the aisle. I know Assemblymember Thiele, you were a member of the Independence Party, but we heard mostly from Democrats. Now we're going to hear from the other side of the aisle, Senator Boyle. What are some of your priorities going into the end of the session?
Thank you, Rebecca, and thank you, City and State and AARP for holding this. Ironically, my three top priorities coincide exactly with AARP's. I support secure choice and accessory apartments reform, and so I will be working on those. And I think another big thing is getting New York back in terms of healthcare and in the economy. One of the frustrating things for me is not taking the emergency powers completely away from the governor. It seems like every other day we're getting some mandate out there. Children should wear masks. 2 days later, they shouldn't wear masks. So it needs to be the legislature, both Republican and Democrats on both Assembly and Senate, need to have a say in these matters so that we can tell our constituents, this is what we're trying to do to make sure as many people as possible get vaccinated, we get herd immunity as quickly as possible, and we get this economy truly moving. It's starting there. We're getting there. We're getting to the end of the tunnel, but we're not there yet. And it's vitally important that we use this summer and these next few months to do so. The other areas quickly I'll be working on, I'm the ranking minority member on the Judiciary Committee. Well, obviously, we have Court of Appeals nominees and other nominees to be confirmed in the next couple of weeks. And also one minor thing that I have worked on for a long time, I hope to get passed, is it's a bill that would ban the sale of cosmetics in New York State that have been tested on animals. Thank you.
And certainly, yes, one of those nominees for the Court of Appeals is Nassau County's own Madeline Singas. So there will be a special election in Nassau County coming up if she gets confirmed. So a little bit of Long Island specific things happening there as well.
Absolutely.
And finally, Senator Palumbo, what are your priorities for the end of session? Perhaps having some technical difficulties. I've been told that the senator is there. Perhaps having some technical difficulties. So we can come back to this, Senator Palumbo. I want to throw out there something that is not necessarily Long Island specific, but is drumming up a lot of um, headline for the end of session, and wanted to, ask each of you where you stand on the issue. And parole reform is a very big issue for the end of session. Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie has said recently that it's something that he'll be looking at, and certainly there's been a big push to get it done. Just briefly, just curious where each of you kind of fall on the package of bills on parole reform, the less is more, the elder parole. I know that bail reform a couple years ago was a very major issue that was a little controversial and had some mixed opinions here, especially on Long Island. Just wanted to know kind of where this issue stands for each of you. And I don't want to put anyone on the spot immediately, so whoever wants to weigh in first. Just wanted to get some thoughts about this hot topic issue. Senator Boyle, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. There are a few proposals in terms of parole reform. I think we saw some big problems with the bail reform that was tried a couple years ago, and so we don't want to have anything remotely like that. One of the ones that concerns me most is as you mentioned, the elder parole reform. And if you were to tell me, okay, we're going to allow people who are 85 or 80 or even 75, we're going to give them certainly the opportunity to get parole, I'd say, okay, yeah, but 55 is the age that they're talking about. If you're turned 55 and you've been in jail for 15 years, according to this Senator Hoylman's bill, you could potentially get parole. Now, you could be a serial killer, you could be a terrorist, which I think is absolutely insane. You want to talk about truly elder, 75, 80 or older, no question, but letting someone out 55, there's very dangerous people who are 55 and 56 years old. And that should not be passed. We also need to look at the seriousness of the crime. It's not just the opportunity for them to say, I was a good person while I was incarcerated. What did they do to get in there? And we need to think about the victims and protecting society when we're looking at any of these bills. That's the most important aspects of any of these parole reform bills, and that's what I'll be looking at.
And any other thoughts about that? Like I said, I know it's a little controversial. It's a hot topic right now. The senator has made clear his thoughts on it. I'm wondering if there is any other thoughts about parole reform. Assemblymember Jean-Pierre, it looks like you want to weigh in.
Well, I support the initiative. What the bill that's out there right now allows people to, after serving 15 years, allows people to actually go in front of the parole board. So that's really what the legislation just allows people, just the opportunity to go before the parole board, not necessarily being released. So I support the initiative if it comes to the floor for a vote. I look forward to supporting it.
And Senator Brooks.
Thank you. I kind of have a little bit of a unique background. Prior to getting into the legislature, I participated in a project from a risk management standpoint, dealing with some of the prisons in this state and mental health institutions, and both local and state facilities. And a few of the more local facilities I visited, they made a tremendous effort to take those people that have been incarcerated and begin early on training them to be able to return to society, if you will. And one of the things, and particularly with the younger people, one of the things that we saw there is almost all of the kids, if you will, that were in prison were taking college courses and being trained occupational skills. So I'm kind of in between where Phil is and where Kim is. I think to take people that have been in prison for an extended period of time and give them the opportunity to go before the parole board to be considered for parole is the right thing. I think the things they were involved in have to be a consideration prior to. But I think we also have to examine how ready they are to return. If someone's not prepared at all, if someone doesn't have a skill set, they're not, it's going to be a difficult transition. So part of this bill really also measures the effectiveness of what we're doing in prisons and how we're preparing people, if you will, how we're rescuing people so that they can return to society. So I agree with Kim. I think people should be given the consideration, but I'd like us to take a look at how our prisons are being run and recognize that part of our objective should be for those people who can return to society, prepare them for that. And I don't think we do enough of that. I'm concerned with people with severe prior records and people that haven't really shown a change in their approach, if you will, being released. I don't think there should be a wholesale situation, but I think we should be looking at considering returning people. But I think we should be looking more about what we're doing in prison and preparing people so that they can return. Would I move forward with the legislation? Yes. Would I move forward with the legislation if there were automatic paroles? No. I think we have to make sure people have made progress, but we need to do a better job in our prisons. And one of the things we don't do a good job in our prisons is recognize those people who are prisoned more for mental health problems and criminal problems and get them the help they need. So I would be inclined to move this legislation forward, but I would really like to see some changes made in how we're managing our prisons and how we're dealing with people with mental health issues.
Sure, Assemblymember Griffin.
Let's see. Yeah, I believe that we have to, I believe we have to tread lightly here. One of the things that concerns myself as well as many constituents who have actually called me about this is there's a big difference between someone that may have committed offense. Let's say they were overcharged. They were found with, some amount of drugs, and it turned out they didn't have a good defense. They couldn't afford it at the time. They were overcharged and they got put away for an excessively long time. I think we should look at cases like that, and we should, qualify it. It shouldn't be that everyone who's over 55 gets to have a parole hearing, because what happens is, like, there are two cases that I have in mind where the survivors, the family have talked to me. The Ferguson case where there was a major shooting on the Long Island Railroad, and he was given at least 3 life sentences. And when this bill first came out and I first took office in 2019, his niece called my office and she said, I was there when he got sentenced. He got 3 life sentences. Are you going to vote for this? And like, when we just say, oh, well, there's going to be a hearing, the family, the victim's family has to come to that hearing. There's another awful case that happened, I think, in like 1990. This poor young girl, about 14 or 15, Cheryl Tinez, was raped, brutally murdered. It was really, really brutal. And the convicted felon on this, he's somewhere about 55. So, that family goes every couple of years for parole hearings, and it's extremely painful. And when I took office, that person emailed me, he Facebook messaged me and told me what his family goes through for all these decades. And I remembered that case, and I really felt for that family. So I think this would be so much better if we worked it out, where people that are sitting in jail that were overcharged, didn't have a good defense, may likely be innocent, maybe with new DNA evidence. I think we should look at those cases and not just have it all in one basket. And so I think that, to me, is that's of a concern, that we're just making it very open and including everyone over 55, where I think we should really have some parameters. So that, speaking for my constituents, I think that's a very important for me and my district.
There's certainly a lot to be thought about with this, and it's certainly not a given whether or not this is something that will even be decided for the end of session, but certainly a lot of people are pushing for it. To go back to some of the priorities that Kristen had mentioned, the three piece of legislation, I know that Senator Boyle said that for him it aligned pretty closely. I'm just kind of curious to get into a little bit more of a discussion about, where some of this legislation is, how much you're supporting it. Um, the likelihood that some of these things are going to pass. Many groups have priorities, but as we've seen some of our most vulnerable New Yorkers suffering during the pandemic, and an opportunity to address longstanding issues, and issues for our older New Yorkers and our seniors is something certainly that could come out of the pandemic. So what are some of the actions that are happening with the specific bills that Kristen mentioned? Senator Brooks, it looks like you've unmuted.
Yeah, I think as with Phil, I support the bills themselves. I think, and I just want to talk a little bit about the situation our seniors find themselves in because of how we do things, and why the ability to sublet some apartments and the rest makes so much sense. We throughout our state, and certainly here on Long Island, we are funding most of the cost of education, in many districts 70 and 80% of the cost of education, via property taxes. Our property taxes are basically determined, or we value our home based on the market value of a home. Our seniors, many of them in my community, bought their houses years and years ago when they first got married. Maybe they paid, say, $15,000 for that house. And over the years, the house appreciated greatly. And in many of those people right now, they're paying more each year on taxes than they paid for the house. We're in a situation where we make the assumption that the real property value is reflective of your financial condition. It is not. You have younger people, let's say, that buy a house, we'll say for $500,000, just for a number. They may have a $450,000 mortgage. They don't have a $500,000 house. They have a $50,000 house that the bank owns more than they do. But we tax them the same as the neighbor next door that may have that house paid free and clear and has no mortgage obligation. We're in a situation where most of our seniors are on fixed incomes, and the tax bills that they're getting become exceptionally difficult. We know we have a housing shortage here on Long Island. The ability to rent a room or a downstairs apartment, whatever you might have, to a younger couple that can't afford a home right now, is a benefit to our community. We're funding education improperly. We're making assumptions that are not reflective of reality in terms of people's financial condition. So the bill that where the trend is, I think, is absolutely what we have to do. So I think the three bills that you identified are all good common sense bills that are reflective of the needs that we have here on Long Island in particular, and across the state. So I support fully the proposals you have.
Thank you, Senator Brooks. Happy to be a native to your district.
Well, we're glad to have you.
Anyone else? If there's maybe one of the three that is a picture. Assembly Member Griffin.
Yeah, well, we already did pass the Secure Choice Savings Program, which I think is so important. And I think that's a really a good bill for really people of, all ages. So I'm really happy about that. And the drug affordability is a huge problem. So I fully support that as well. And really hope that we get, past that this session. Anything we can do to make drugs more affordable for everyone, and of course seniors, is just essential. So I'm for that. And affordable housing is a really big issue. And so many programs could be developed, more programs. I remember years ago, my grandparents, a town of Islip, had a great program where they had a complex where you brought in your financial statements, they looked at them, and from there they decided what your rent would be. And so my grandparents, lived out in like an expensive apartment for a number of years, and then they got to move into this facility, which was all seniors, but it was all seniors where like they had their income, that was what it was, and then they decided what your rent was. And I always remember that, like at the time I thought, well, isn't that great for Nana and Papa? But I realized that would be great if more towns had things like that. So I would love to see more of that. This bill I think is important, so I support that. But I think there's much more ways that we need to look at it. For seniors, like living in a house, as Senator Brooks said, paying triple to quadruple maybe what they pay for in the house they're paying for in taxes. So it's just so difficult. So helping residents stay in their homes, and then also residents who want to move out, making it affordable, because a lot of people might want to sell their home, but then they sell their home, they're living in a smaller space, and it might cost so much money to rent a place. So, I think we need more programs and need to look at more ways that we can provide as we revitalize towns. Baldwin's under a revitalization project now. We should always be factoring in when we, do any of these revitalization projects, if we could factor in affordable housing for seniors, for veterans, as well as young people.
Assemblymember Thiele.
Thank you. I support the Secure Choice Program. As was mentioned, it's passed the Assembly. And I think, we've had a record also in the Assembly, I think in the Senate too, as far as trying to limit drug prices. Pharmacy benefit manager legislation got vetoed a couple of years back. We're still kind of fighting that. I'm going to focus on the accessory apartment law that you mentioned, because it's in my committee, local governments. And I've had a number of conversations with Assemblymember Harvey Epstein, who is the sponsor. And, the fact is at least in my district, every village, every town has an accessory apartment ordinance already, and they don't get used. And one reason is the process is often too cumbersome. By the time you have to go get a permit. By the time you have to hire a lawyer and a surveyor and an architect and all of that, it becomes an issue. The other issue I think also that comes up under the existing law is that you get a permit for an accessory apartment and people are afraid that the tax assessor's coming next because you've improved your house and now the assessment is going to increase. So what happens to a large degree is people do it illegally or they don't do it at all. So, Assemblymember Epstein and I, we've looked at the bill. We both share the intent of the bill. I think it's my feeling that we also need to build in some incentives to the bill with regard to maybe some form of property tax relief. We're giving away everything right now to get people to get vaccinated. With regard to accessory apartments, maybe to encourage people to do it, we have to look at some sort of property tax relief, or maybe also I mentioned that I've got a bill with regard to establishing housing funds, actually providing financial assistance that help people build these. So we both share the goals of this. I think where we are with the bill, to be quite honest, is that its chances of passing this year, because there are a lot of issues. I'm not sure it's going to pass this year, but it is going to be the top priority of the Local Governments Committee. Assemblyman Epstein and I have already talked about having hearings in the summertime to get a bill that doesn't just authorize accessory apartments and make sure that every town and village and city has an ordinance that does them, but also provides the incentives that actually gets people to go through the door in town hall and village hall and city hall to actually file for them. Because to me, it's not just getting local governments to do it, it's getting the residents in the community to do it. And some of the impediments to accessory apartments aren't just regulatory. We need incentives. So I think we're all committed to doing it, and I'm sure we'll be moving forward with it.
I'd like to, we are running out of time. I just wanted to return to something Assemblymember Thiele had brought up in relation to Assemblymember Englebright as well. Obviously LIPA has been in the news a lot since last year, and so has discussions of municipalizing LIPA. I just wanted to get some thoughts about that, and maybe start with you, Assemblymember Englebright. As Assemblymember Thiele had said, this is something that you've long supported.
Absolutely. The idea that we should all be subjected to the whims of the Public Service Commission or the local utility monopoly really runs counter to the need that we have to have some control over or some predictability regarding the production of electricity and use of electricity. Having the profit motive built into a private company that is a monopoly led to some real problems. The Shoreham Nuclear Power Plant and the Jamesport 1 power plant and the Jamesport 2 power plant were all conceived. The last two were never built, but they were conceived basically out of the idea of exploiting the people of Long Island. And we did not need those power plants, but the company felt at that time, it was the Long Island Lighting Company, that they wanted to be able to make more money, and that they had an inroad to getting rate increases due to the nature of the relationship they had with the Public Service Commission. That is kind of the backdrop against which we now look at having our utilities managed again by private for-profit corporations. I mean, the reason we pushed for public power was to control our own power destiny. And yet we now find ourselves with National Grid, which is owned by a foreign country or by a company in a foreign country in England. And PSEG, of course, is from New Jersey, is a for-profit company that has failed terribly in terms of their obligations for preparing for extratropical storms that have increased in frequency due to the climate changes that are underway. So I think it's pretty clear that we should move to simplify the profile of our power generation and use, put it into the control, again, just of the people. So that's why we set up an authority to do that. And we never really completed the job. I think we need to do that. And we have an opportunity now, and we see that PSEG has failed terribly in their mission at great expense. They've received huge compensation for a terrible job. We're at a point where I believe we need to move toward our own control of our electric production and use destiny. And that would mean getting rid of the profit motive and recognizing the benefits of a publicly owned utility system.
Rebecca, if I can just jump in very quickly, because I know what an issue utility rates is, particularly on Long Island. And I just want to draw attention to a bill that passed the Senate this week and is still pending in the Assembly. It's a Parker Cahill bill around establishing intervenor funding So this is funding that community groups and citizens and organizations can use to argue against things like rate hikes before the Public Service Commission. We know that there's a hugely on-level playing field for the consumer when it comes to these utility rate hikes and other regulatory issues. So this really goes to address that, at least financially, because we know that when we pay our utility bill, a portion of what we pay goes to the utility company to sit in front of the PSC and argue to make our rates higher. So we might as well level this playing field and give us a bit of a voice in the process and a little leg up. So hopefully we can get that through the assembly this session.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I would love to hear from more of you. And there are so many topics that we have not touched on. You know, questions that were raised in the Q&A that unfortunately we just didn't have enough time to touch on with so many legislators who were able to join us here today. Unfortunately, that means that the hour goes by very quickly. You know, so we are unfortunately out of time. So I want to thank all of the legislators who joined us and Kristen from AARP and AARP again for sponsoring this event. You know, I hope that it was, you know, good and informative for everyone who tuned in. You know, I do wish that we could have touched a little bit more. There were some great questions in the Q&A that I think also would have had sparked some very good conversations. Before we close out, I just want to mention a couple of upcoming events happening with City and State. Wednesday, June 2nd is going to be our Queens Power 100 event. You can register online at our website. It's also in the chat. On Wednesday, June 9th, we're celebrating our Albany Power 100 list. Registration is also free. You can sign up online or in the chat. And on Wednesday, June 16th at 12:30, I forgot to mention those first two events are at 5 p.m. This last event, June 16th, 12:30, our sister organization, NYN Media, is putting on a webinar called OpCon, which discusses nonprofits. And again, you can register online at nynmedia.com or the link in the chat. Thank you again, everyone, for joining, all the legislators, Kristen, for being part of this panel, and all of our attendees for joining us for this discussion today.